The wind whispered through the cedar trees that lined the edge of Beckett Ranch, carrying the faint scent of pine and time-worn earth. It was the kind of morning that promised nothing new. Just the same quiet routines, the same long shadows stretching over wooden fences, and the same man who rose before the sun. Raymond Beckett moved with precision as he cleaned the training yard, his weathered hands steady from decades of experience. The ranch was his kingdom, and the dogs, obedient, purebred, disciplined, were his soldiers. He'd trained champions here, national winners. His name once carried weight in every major canine circuit in the country. But this story isn't about him. It's about a little girl sitting cross-legged near the edge of the fence, watching silently with eyes too old for her 8 years. Emma Beckett, his granddaughter, the only child of his erunged son, who now worked in a city far away and had left Emma here to grow under her grandfather's care. Her mother, a ghost, a topic never spoken of. Not by him, but Emma never stopped wondering. Every night she would stare at the old photograph tucked in her storybook, the one with her mother's smile frozen in a happier time. And every morning she'd ask the same question in different ways, hoping her grandfather might answer differently. Just once. He never did until one night. In a moment he thought she wasn't listening. He said something he didn't remember. But Emma did, and it changed everything. Raymond Beckett had not always been a hard man, but somewhere along the way, pride and principle had hardened him like sun-baked clay. He had grown up in a time when authority was law and silence was strength. He built a reputation on discipline, control, and tradition. In the dog world he was legendary. In his family he was feared. Years ago, when his son David fell in love with Lily, free-spirited, unpredictable, and nothing like the women Raymond had imagined for his only child, he objected loudly, constantly. And when David chose her anyway, Raymond drew a line that none of them dared cross. What began as tension turned into distance, distance into silence, silence into arrangement. Emma had been just a toddler when her parents separated. Her father returned to the ranch with her, broken and bitter, unwilling to speak of the past. Her mother vanished from their lives like a chapter torn out mid-story. Raymond believed he was protecting the family name, shielding Emma from the chaos of what he saw as failure. But Emma didn't see failure. He saw absence, a hole that bedtime stories couldn't fill. She asked about her mother at every opportunity during meals, in the truck on the way to feed the dogs, while brushing out the thick coats of the collies, always with the same soft tone, always met with a cold silence. And then one evening while working with the young handlers at a small community event, Raymond said it not to her, but to one of the boys struggling to train his dog. If that girl of mine had ever beat me in the ring, maybe I'd have let her see her mother whenever she wanted. He didn't think Emma heard it, but she did. She held on to that sentence like a secret treasure, turned it over in her mind 1,000 times, memorized every word, every pause, not as a challenge, but as a promise. And deep in her heart something bloomed, part determination, part defiance, and entirely hers. Emma didn't speak of what she'd heard, not to her grandfather, not to her father during their brief weekend phone calls, not even to the dog she trusted with every childhood secret. simply kept it. The words became her compass. If that girl of mine had ever beat me in the ring, a challenge maybe, but to Emma it was more than that. Was the first door, no matter how small, how fragile, that had ever opened toward her mother. For the first time she didn't feel powerless. She had a path, a way, however impossible it might seem. It existed, and that was enough. From that night on, Emma changed. Not in loud, obvious ways, but in the kind that reshapes a person from the inside out. She started waking up earlier, watching the morning routines with sharper focus, mimicking the hand signals her grandfather used, studying the dogs, not just how they moved but how they listened. She spent hours reading old training manuals in the storage shed, tracing faded diagrams with her small fingers. She whispered commands to herself at night, practicing tone and posture in the mirror when no one was looking. There were no trainers to guide her, no mentors cheering her on, just determination and a little girl's longing stitched deep into every word she spoke. Emma didn't know when the day would come or how she'd get there, but she knew what she was working toward. She wasn't trying to win a ribbon. She was trying to earn a reunion. And for a child like her, that kind of hope was stronger than any prize. The first problem Emma faced was simple but daunting. She didn't have a dog, not one of her grandfather's meticulously trained shepherds, not even a pup she could call her own. Every animal on Beckett Ranch was either in training or retired after a full show career, and none were hers to claim. So Emma began to look elsewhere. After school, she would ride her bike across town to peek through the fences of neighbors' yards. She visited the local shelter so many times, the volunteers started greeting her by name. She asked strangers at the farmer's market if they had dogs they didn't want anymore. Most said no, smiled politely. A few pied her. But Emma didn't stop. One rainy afternoon, while taking a longer route home, she passed an abandoned lot behind an old auto shop. There, half hidden beneath a collapsed wooden crate, was a trembling shape, covered in mud and tangled fur. It was a dog, or something close to one. A young German shepherd, though you'd hardly recognize the breed under the grime and scars. Skinny, scarred, one ear bent, wrong, eyes too tired for such a young body. Emma approached slowly, needling in the wet grass. The dog growled a low, uncertain warning, but didn't run. She didn't speak, just held out her hand and waited. Minutes passed. Finally, the dog crept forward and sniffed her fingers. That was enough. She named him Max. Bringing him home wasn't easy. Her grandfather barely glanced up when she entered, soaked and shivering, the dog trailing behind her. "If that thing's no show dog," he muttered. Emma said nothing. She bathed Max in warm water, picked burrs from his coat, and wrapped him in an old towel. He didn't wag his tail, didn't lick her face, but he didn't leave either. In that quiet, Emma saw herself in him, wounded, unwanted, still holding on. They didn't begin with trust, but they began. And for Emma, that was all she needed. Training Max wasn't like training one of the well-bred dogs on her grandfather's ranch. He didn't know how to sit, stay, or even come when called. He flinched at sudden movements and loud noises. Sometimes he would stare at a corner of the room for minutes, lost in some quiet Trauma Emma couldn't name. But she didn't give up. She couldn't. Emma studied everything. She borrowed training books from the library, watched grainy online videos at the town's public computer, and even sneaked into local dog club practices to observe. When trainers kicked her out for being too young, she'd watch from behind fences, taking notes on hand signals and leash techniques. Failure was her best teacher. Some competitions were brutal. At one county fair event, Max froze mid-course, terrified by the noise from a nearby demolition derby. He wouldn't move, just stood trembling while spectators whispered and snickered. Emma didn't cry, at least not until they got home. That night, she curled up beside Max on the barn floor, tears soaking into his fur. She whispered to him like she imagined her mother might have whispered to her once. "It's okay. Learning." At another event, a judge criticized Emma for wasting everyone's time with an untrainable stray. That one cut deep, but she didn't argue. Instead, she watched the other handlers, their confidence, their fluid movements, the seamless bond with their dogs. Then she went home and practiced harder. She kept a journal of every show, what worked, what failed, how Max reacted to distractions, what calmed him down. Her notes were messy, written in pencil and smudged with dirt, but they were maps, hand-drawn charts to somewhere better. And slowly they got better. One judge at a regional expo paused after their routine, knelt and said, "That dog trusts you more than some handlers can ever earn." Emma didn't win that day, but it was the first time she felt like maybe, just maybe, they were being seen for who they really were. Not polished, but real. She discovered that patience wasn't just about waiting. It was about trusting the process. That a whisper could be more powerful than a shout. That dogs didn't follow commands. They followed connection. Every day after school, Emma trained in the old corral behind the barn. The wooden posts were rotting, the ground uneven, but it was their arena. She built jumps from broomsticks, weaved cones from soda bottles, and turned the dusty patch of dirt into a space of determination. Max changed too. He stopped flinching, began anticipating her movements, started wagging his tail. Not all the time, but enough to break Emma's heart with joy each time it happened. 2 years passed like that. While her classmates obsessed over cartoons and phones, Emma obsessed over cues and correction timing. While other kids planned for dances and sleepovers, she planned routines and rewatched her mistakes. She never told her grandfather. Not yet. Emma wanted to prove herself first, not with words, with work. And Max was her partner in that promise. It was Emma who brought it up first. At dinner one quiet evening, she looked across the table at her grandfather and said, "You told me once, if I trained a dog well enough to beat you, you'd let me see my mom." The old man froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. "I never said that," he muttered. But something in his voice cracked like maybe, just maybe, he had said it long ago in anger or justice. But to Emma it had never been a joke. "I'm ready," she said simply. "Max and we're ready." He studied her, really studied her. For the first time in a long time, the softness in her cheeks had sharpened into the quiet strength of someone who knew how to persevere. She looked more like her mother than ever. "You want a challenge?" he asked. Tomorrow at the ring, just like the old days. Emma nodded. That night, she barely slept. She and Max rehearsed their routines one final time under the barn's old flood light. Not for perfection, but for connection, that unspoken understanding that had taken years to build. Morning came, heavy with silence. The corral looked different that day, bigger, somehow. Her grandfather stood on one side with his polished border collie, a champion with perfect form. Emma stood on the other, Max beside her, alert and still. The routine began. Her grandfather's run was flawless. Tight turns, clean lines. The dog moved like water flowing through the course with mechanical elegance. Then it was Emma's turn. Max hesitated at the first jump, but only for a moment. Then, as if remembering every long night, every whispered encouragement, he leapt. What followed wasn't perfection, but it was something better. Max responded to Emma's movements like a dance, sometimes clumsy, sometimes sharp, but always in sync. When she faltered, he steadied. When he slowed, she lifted him with her voice. By the time they crossed the final marker, the silence around the ring was breathless. Her grandfather didn't clap. He just walked over, looked down at Max, and then at Emma. You trained him, he said. She nodded. He cleared his throat. You trained yourself too, but, he added after a long pause, that wasn't enough to beat me. Emma's heart sank. I've spent my life in the ring. I've trained national champions. What you did today was brave and raw, but not yet enough. She tried to hide her disappointment, but her eyes shimmered. Max leaned into her leg, sensing the weight of the moment. But her grandfather continued, You surprised me. You surprised a lot of people. He looked down at Max, then back at Emma. There was something softer in his face, something that hadn't been there in years. I'll give you one more shot, he said. 3 days from now. Then place. Final round. If you win, the promise stands. Emma's breath caught. She nodded once firmly. Over the next 3 days, the ranch transformed into a storm of motion and discipline. Emma rewrote her routines, dissecting every misstep from the first trial. She set up new challenges in the corral, simulated distractions, and recorded her sessions. To catch subtle errors, she whispered encouragements to Max when he hesitated. She rewarded him with laughter when he succeeded. And each night they trained, under the stars. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for something that mattered more, a promise. By the third morning, Emma and Max were moving as one. The mistakes were still there, but now they were threaded with grace. Max's eyes never left her. Her voice never wavered. The arena wasn't just a ring anymore. It was their home field, and they were ready. The final trial was quieter. No crowd, no fanfare, just the sound of wind through the grass and the soft creak of the gate as Emma led Max into the ring for the second and final time. Her grandfather was already there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The border collie beside him stood poised and ready, its coat shimmering in the late afternoon light. Ready? The old man asked. Emma nodded. We are. The whistle blew. Emma moved first, her commands quieter now, more fluid. The had stopped trying to be perfect. They trusted the connection they had built. Max moved with her, not in perfect precision, but with a rhythm born from 2 years of shared struggle and unwavering trust. Each jump was a memory, each turn a promise kept. They weren't just performing, they were telling their story, one step at a time. When they reached the final task, a directional retrieve, Max hesitated. Emma didn't speak. She just looked at him. Max turned, sprinted, retrieved the right object, and came flying back, tail high, ears alert. They finished. No cheers, no judges, just 2 hearts, still racing in the silence. Her grandfather didn't say anything at first. He just walked over and kneeled beside Max, his rough hand running gently over the shepherd's ears. This dog is something else. He looked up at Emma. You are too, Emma. And I think your mother would be proud. I should have let you know that a long time ago. For a long moment, the two of them just stood there, 3 generations apart, but finally meeting in the same place. Was wrong, he said finally. About your mother, about you. Emma swallowed hard. She never stopped asking about me, she said. I know you told Dad not to let me see her, but I need to. I know, he said. And you will. Emma stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she said, it was never just about proving I could train a dog. I wanted a family. Again. I wanted us all in one place. Laughing, eating, fighting even, but together. She looked at Max, who sat faithfully at her feet. When Mom left, everything broke. And I thought, maybe if I could do something big enough, something impossible, it would matter. That maybe love could still win, even after everything. Her grandfather swallowed hard, and this time he had no answer. Only tears gathering in the corners of his tired eyes. That evening, he made the call himself. The next day, when Emma saw her mother waiting at the gate, she didn't run. She walked slowly, steadily, with Max beside her. And when they finally embraced, it wasn't just a reunion. It was a beginning. 1 year later, the small wooden sign at the entrance of the farm no longer read, just Beaumont Training Grounds. It had been changed, repainted in soft blue and white. The Max and Emma Center for Canine Connection was Emma's idea, but her grandfather carved the letters himself. The barn, once old and hollow now, echoed with barks and laughter. Dogs of all breeds ran through obstacle courses, while children and parents watched, cheered, and learned together. Emma, now 10, ran a class for younger kids every Saturday. Max, still by her side, grayer around the muzzle now, but just as sharp, just as loyal. Her mother helped organize weekend workshops, and her father, now home more often, managed the daily operations with her grandfather, who had grown quieter but warmer. The man who once believed love had to be earned through obedience, now watched his granddaughter teach that trust came from listening first. Max, who had once been just a stray with no name, was now the heart of a place where families found joy again, a place where stubbornness gave way to softness and where healing wasn't a miracle. It was a choice made daily. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Emma sat on the porch with Max's head in her lap, the cool breeze brushing past them. "We did it, Max," she whispered. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't move. He just closed his eyes and rested completely, peacefully. And Emma, with tears gently tracing her cheeks, whispered again, "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Because even if he couldn't answer, he had always known. Because he knew they were finally home.